Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Wednesday, February 26th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. We have two topics today. The NFL Combine is underway in Indianapolis, and that means Chiefs personnel take the podium for the first time since the Super Bowl celebration. Today, you'll hear from General Manager Brett Veach, who in a press conference setting took questions mostly about the contracts of several players. After a break, I catch up with Royals beat writer Lynn Worthy, who's basking in the sunshine of spring training in Surprise, Arizona, plus he's working hard. We chatted with Lynn after Tuesday's Cactus League game against the Texas Rangers and covered several subjects like the prospects of Greg Holland, Khalil Lee, and Salvador Perez playing first base. But first, here's Veach. You won't easily hear the questions he was asked, but the topics, nearly all of them about contracts, followed in this order: Chris Jones, Patrick Mahomes, Sammy Watkins, and finally the cornerback position. So here we go with Chiefs General Manager Brett Veach.
All right, well, first off, I'd just like to say it's exciting to be back here in Indy for the 2020 Combine, and I want to thank Jeff Foster and his Combine crew for the unbelievable job they do. Every year this thing seems to get bigger and bigger, but Jeff and his crew make this thing run more efficiently year in and year out. So special thanks to him. I want to thank and congratulate all the employees back at 1 Arrowhead Drive in Kansas City, Missouri. It's hard enough to win games in this league week in and week out, and to think back on what we accomplished, from 4 straight division titles to an AFC Conference championship, and then our first Super Bowl win in 50 years is truly a testament to everyone in that building. Everyone has a part. Starts with Clark Hunt and the leadership and the blueprint he provides, to Mark Donovan on the business side, Coach Reed and all of his coaches, just done a tremendous job. But again, everyone in that building had a role in this, and certainly want to thank and congratulate them. And lastly, and most importantly for me, it's a time for me to acknowledge just the special personnel staff I have. I'm truly blessed and fortunate to come to work every day with some of the best scouts in the National Football League. These guys bust their tail, every single day of the year, and it's truly a process here. I know these guys are excited to get to work because we all know that the foundation for winning a Super Bowl really starts here during the offseason here at the Combine and the draft process and the free agency process. And last year, it's really a testament to the work they did. We came here last year. We were an offsides away from going to the Super Bowl, and our guys were aggressive throughout every transactional period through the season, and being able to flip basically an entire defensive roster and add 12 new guys and have all these guys come in and contribute. It just shows how talented my staff is and how blessed I am to work with them. So, with that, I'll open up and take your questions.
Brett, you mentioned the foundation. How important is it for you to get a guy like Chris Jones back into the play? Does the franchise tag, does that scenario still remain a possibility?
Yeah, listen, it's certainly a priority for us, and I had mentioned that. I mean, sometimes these things take some time to work through. As you mentioned, the franchise tag is something that we have the ability to use. We certainly like to see if we can work something out with him, and I think the tandem of Chris Jones and Frank Clark is something that any team would want, and we're going to work hard to see if we can get that done.
Clark had mentioned back in December, I think, on the discussions between the Chiefs and Jones's camp is still ongoing. How would you categorize those discussions?
Yeah, no, they have been ongoing, and we actually have a meeting scheduled up here in the next couple of days. We had dialogue last offseason. We had dialogue prior to the season starting. Chris did a great job of blocking all that and just really attacking the season. He handled it like a true pro. Now we have the opportunity, once this cycle comes back around, to pick up where those conversations left off, and hopefully we can make some headway and get something done.
Brett, how meaningful is it that you guys had those discussions in the offseason, and then you guys are still able to manage each other's understanding of both parties? How much can that impact these discussions as you move towards something that may be more concrete?
Yeah, I think it's meaningful. Listen, all dialogue is good dialogue, and I think just being up front where we are as an organization, and what our expectations are in regards to what Chris and his camp, what their expectations are. The last thing you want is for something to go awry because there just wasn't enough communication. So you can't have enough dialogue, and like I said, they've been very open and honest with us, and we feel we've been have handled this situation in a very similar fashion. So again, we're looking forward to sitting down with his agents this week and and continuing to pick up on the dialogue and where it left off.
In balancing the cap, do you think it's feasible to pay a guy like Frank Clark what he's getting paid and pay Chris Jones?
So listen, again, going back to my personnel staff, I also have a great cap staff, and Brant Tillis and Chris Shea do a tremendous job. It's challenging, but doesn't mean it's impossible. And I think just working through, the breakdowns and the dispersals and looking forward, a lot of this, we have to wait with the new CBA and see how that looks. But it's always a challenge. But I think when you have guys as talented as Chris and these other players, I mean, it's you're gonna turn over every scenario and just see what exactly can be done. So it's a challenge, but it's not impossible.
This team built to obviously win now, coming off the Super Bowl championship. I mean, do you see Chris Jones being in a Chiefs uniform this year, whether that's playing under the tag or getting something long term? I mean, is it hard to imagine him not being here?
I would say that it would be, a priority for us to make that happen, and what transpires in the next few weeks or months is to be determined. But certainly our goal and our intent is to keep him in Kansas City. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of time, and that's a good thing in regards to Pat. But I'm almost certain continued dialogue with him like we've had with Chris and these other guys, and as we kind of work through the new landscape of the NFL and the new CBA, we'll certainly get together and hopefully we can get something done. But I mean, that's another big priority. He's the best football player I've ever seen. Yeah, and the good thing is he still is. So that's a positive thing. Special kid, special player, and to have him work with Coach Reed has been a blessing for our organization and the Chiefs Kingdom. So hopefully we have a lot more Super Bowls to win with him, and we're excited to get after the next one. No, because I had said this before. It's I think when you've been around football your entire life and you've seen, sometimes you take for granted how great these players are that you see. And when this kid comes in and makes these talented football players look average, you're seeing something that the league maybe they're not ready for. So, he's just been, from the first day he's been in our building, he was different in regards to his whole approach and his talent level, and it was just a matter of, letting him play a full season. So none of that was a surprise to us, and again, we look forward to more of these seasons and hopefully more of these championships.
One of the things you love about Mahomes is his second reaction ability. Talk about how do you think guys like him, Watson has some of that, and some of these other guys are kind of changing the way people are evaluating players? You were ahead of it, boy. Are you noticing and talking to other evaluators? They look value in that too.
Yeah, I think overall, I just think the mobility in that position is something that every front office and organization, they're striving for. And obviously Lamar Jackson had a great season in Baltimore, but defenses continue to get more athletic and faster, and you need quarterbacks that can make plays outside of the pocket and tuck the ball and move the chain. So I think anytime you have a prospect that has mobility and the ability to extend plays is something that is going to be attractive to all teams.
Brett, it was a time where tag and trades never happened. It was very rare. You guys obviously pulled one off last year. Now I'm not asking you why you guys made that move, but in general, how difficult it is to make when you're jumping. You need a player's cooperation, you need to get a team. How difficult?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think sometimes it just takes you're going to have to find, and really where a team is, right? Because of, you talk about a tag and trade when you're giving up draft commodity and money. I mean, you really have to feel, the team has to be in a position where it makes sense for them, and then you have to be in a position that you feel that this would take you over, that hump. And I go back to the work we did in our personnel staff, that we were convinced that we were moving to a 4-3, and that we had to get a 4-3 end, and it was just taking in all the information you had, where we were picking in the draft and what would be available and what we needed to make this defense go. So I think they're hard because you have to find just the exact scenarios that have to play out in that order, and it was a unique set up last year, and we were certainly happy that we were able to get that done. And obviously winning the Super Bowl, I think, speaks for itself.
You're looking at Sammy Watkins having a $21 million cap hit this upcoming year. You're making the playoffs for you guys. Might be tough to fit under the cap. How do you look at this situation? Do you see there any way you extend the team without a pay cut or restructure? And where are you with that story?
Yeah, Sammy's a guy that, like Chris, that we're going to have dialogue with this week. And, there's certainly different options and different scenarios that could play out with him. He's a guy that we do want back. Again, these are good problems to have because when you win a Super Bowl, you obviously have a lot of good players and they make a lot of money. But Sammy's a guy that, as you mentioned, he's been critical to our playoff success. And just having dialogue, again, like we're going to meet with the Katz brothers. We'll meet with Tory Dandy, Sammy's agent. We have good relationships with these guys. And we'll sit down and we'll talk about the landscape of where we are and what would make sense to us and how we can make this work. And we'll get feedback from them in regards to what they're looking for. And hopefully we can bridge a gap and make something happen and keep as many of these good players on our team as possible.
Couple more, everybody. Couple more.
How do you kind of envision the future of that position?
I'm sorry.
You have a pending free agent behind that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, well, listen, we've been blessed and fortunate to have two veteran guys that just did a tremendous job. Chad got hurt, and then Matt came out of retirement and played really good football for us. And that Minnesota game that we won in the middle of the season was a big deal. We actually have 2 meetings scheduled with both the representatives this week as well, and we'll see how that goes. But I anticipate one of those guys being back, and we'll have to work through the dialogue with both their agents and see what makes sense for them and us.
With 20 pending free agents, is it safe to say you're meeting with all the free agents?
Yeah, it's a busy week. But that's what makes it fun. And then you throw in all the young prospects you get to watch this week, and we're excited about getting after it. And it was cool to win a Super Bowl, but we're on already to the next season, so we're looking forward to it.
With Lillard and Breland, obviously the answer is going to be the same about them being free agents. But if those guys weren't to be there, you've got Charvarius Ward and Rashad Fenton. Where do you feel like, with those 2 young guys you're sitting at cornerback-wise, not knowing what's going to happen outside?
Well, I think Charvarius Ward and the things he's able to do over the last 2 years, I think speaks for itself. I think he's shown that he's a starter in this league. And Rashad, because of some of the injuries we had this past season, he's a guy that has stepped up and played an important role in our season last year, and we expect more out of him. He has some nickel and some outside versatility. We're excited with both those guys, but the volume will be low if we're not able to retain all these corners, so we'll certainly be trying to address that as we move into the offseason here. I think when you talk about starters, we do so much, Spags does such a great job of mixing up what he wants to do day in and day out, and we do so much nickel and dime stuff. To say he's a starter, maybe a different take from somebody else, but just knowing what Steve does and how he implements so many defensive backs, these guys are going to play 60, 70, 80% anyway. So, those guys are basically starters.
Hey, it's Blair. Hey, we have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Stars award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns we have to offer. And it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. For your convenience, your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. A lot of subscription services won't tell you that. They'll just sneak it on there. We just told you. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. Lynn Worthy, Royals beat writer, joins us from Surprise, Arizona. And Lynn, I've got the long-range weather forecast for Surprise called up here, and not a drop of rain in the forecast for it looks like about 10 days, and highs in the mid-70s, lows in the mid-40s every night. It just seems like perfect spring training weather for everybody who's playing in Phoenix, but more importantly, for the writers who are in the Phoenix area.
Yeah. I think it was yesterday or the day before it got into the neighborhood of 60s, low 60s, mid-60s. And, I think I actually had to put on, the pullover on, during the day the other day. So it was it was a trying time, but we powered through it, and but it's good to hear that we'll be 70s and 80s the rest of the way. So
yeah, well, this is what spring training should be, and I'm glad it's going to work out for you. Let's talk about some developments involving the Royals here since they started playing games here over the last several days. One thing that I found interesting was the one inning pitched by Greg Holland. I think it was on Monday against the Padres. Holland got a 1-2-3 inning, and I think he was credited, got the victory in that game. And for Royals fans, they are so familiar with Greg Holland, who was over 40 saves a couple of times for the Royals. Left the organization for several years, but is now back. What's his status? Where does he stand with this team? What are the chances of him being on the roster?
Well, it's not a given because he signed a minor league contract. So even when we talked to him after his outing yesterday, that was one of the things he said is it's a little different this time being at spring training because, his main focus is making a team. It's not just like you come into spring training and you can have some veteran guys who, your spot's secure, you just work on some things. He's got to actually, prove some things to the coaching staff, the front office, just to make sure he's on this team before you can just say, okay, I don't have to worry about, roster. I can just worry about fine-tuning this, working on that, adding this. First things first, he's got to make the team. I think there's a pretty good shot of that considering his track record, his familiarity with the organization, and the fact that, he still seems like he can get people out. I mean, it's spring training here, but I think he's still got that good breaking ball, the slider. The velocity isn't quite what it used to be, but he can still, I think, get guys out. And if he can do it consistently enough, I think he'll get a shot in this bullpen.
I tell you what, for about 4 or 5 years, he was about as good as it got in baseball. He had 47 and 46 and 32 saves for the Royals in 3 years. That 32 was an abbreviated year in 2015 when he didn't finish the World Series season because of an injury. Then he's off to Colorado in 2017 after sitting out the 2016 season and leads the National League with 41 saves for the Rockies. So, I mean, he in his prime, he was about, like I said, about as good as it got on the hill. And this is the bullpen is a place that's uncertain for the Royals anyway, right? I mean, we're looking at Ian Kennedy as the closer, and there are certainly some other roles that we think are, for which there are favorites, but there are also some possibilities for a guy like Holland to take a spot.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably I'd say there's maybe 3 guys that you'd go into that came into camp saying, okay, these guys are probably in that bullpen. Kennedy, Barlow, and Tim Hill, the left-hander. Those guys, based off of what they've done last year, you figure those guys, if you just start from the starting point, those 3 probably you factor in. I mean, I guess one of them could, in theory, pitch their way out of it, but you start with those 3. And they'll probably have 8 in the bullpen. And for those remaining 5 spots, there might be 15 guys who are somewhat in the running for that. And, I mean, that's with, Holland, Trevor Rosenthal is another veteran who's been,
right,
a closer, all-star caliber, who's, on a minor league deal. And then there's guys that they've had that, that they like and that they want to keep. And, and options, the fact that they don't have options plays a factor. So you're talking about a Jorge Lopez who actually just pitched, we're talking on Tuesday. So he pitched Tuesday in the Cactus League, and, he's now had 2 scoreless outings of multiple innings since they've gotten, the exhibition games rolling. And he'll probably be in that bullpen as sort of a long guy, but a guy who they could also use in shorter stints. Jesse Hahn, who came back last year for the first time since injury and surgery, with the elbow. He didn't actually have Tommy John. He had another UCL repair surgery, and he came back from that late last season. And this year, he's looking to be in the bullpen. He's another guy that, you'd sort of pencil in, but you don't know for sure that that's how it's going to work out. And then Glenn Sparkman's a guy who has been a starter in the past, similar to Jorge Lopez, who most likely would go into the bullpen this year. But I wouldn't be surprised because he does have options if he's one of the guys that goes to Omaha. And, they've got, like I said, there's a bunch of guys. So you got Stephen Woods Jr. is a Rule 5 pick. that, they'd have to keep him on the roster or send him back to Tampa. And the guys who've been in the bullpen in the past, like Kevin McCarthy, excuse me.
Right.
Kevin McCarthy. We're talking about guys like Jake Newberry, guy like I'm blanking on somebody here, but there's
that's right. Hey, but no shortage
of
candidates and arms here to
exactly.
take a look at, right? And you mentioned Lopez. He, 5 strikeouts on Tuesday and 2 2/3 starting the game against the Texas Rangers, so looked good on Tuesday. Hey, I wanted to ask you about a couple other players quickly here. Khalil Lee, here's a guy that Kansas City Royals fans have been hearing about for a few years now, and I love the story that you wrote about him and his reaction just to being in the big league clubhouse at spring training, not just on the, not just the minor league side, but being able to, to participate in a major league clubhouse. Hit a home run against the Padres on Monday. What's Khalil Lee's story?
Well, he's a former, I want to say second round pick. It's either second or third round pick, but guy they drafted out of high school in Virginia. He's still just now, 21 years old, but he seems like he's one of those guys who seems like he's been around for, a long time because, you heard about him when he got drafted and making his way up through the minors. Last year he was their AA player of the year, stole 53 bases. And it sounds like he's really starting to come into his own a little bit more as a hitter. They feel like he's doing things that he hasn't done before as far as, being able to cover the inside part of the plate, being able to show a little bit more power. I asked him just because I felt like he looked a little bit bigger. He says he's up to about 222 pounds, and he was probably between 210 and 215 or so last year. So, I mean, you think that's a kid who, when they drafted out of high school, was 170 pounds. So, still runs, like I said, 53 steals last year. And this is his first time actually being in big league camp. He's a guy who people have seen in big league spring training game, but he was always on the minor league side. So that's one of the things I talked to him about, because one day I'm walking around while they're doing the workout and I see, George Brett just say, "Hey, Khalil," and starts, just asking him stuff. They're just having a little chat by the batting cage. And so I asked him about that because I'm like, for a guy who's still really young, for George Brett to be asking you about what you're looking for and what's your approach at the plate, that's, that could easily be some pretty heady stuff. So,
right.
His first big league camp is it's definitely significant, even though he's been in some games. First time in camp is definitely significant for him. And he said flat out, he's a guy who's not on the 40-man right now, but he wants to make that impression in camp, let the coaches see what he can do and, know how he works, so that if during the season they're looking for somebody to bring up, he wants them to have his name at the top of their list.
Okay, we've talked a little pitching, we've talked a little offense. The defense will wrap it up for us. How about Salvador Perez getting a little bit of time at first base? How much of that can we expect to see this season?
Well, I think we might see a little bit more of it during the spring training, just because they haven't decided to let him catch yet. Mike McKinney said he will catch this spring. They just they haven't done it yet. He played DH and then he first base the other day. He doesn't have any restrictions. The only thing they're sort of trying to hold back on is his volume at this point, just not letting him do a lot of stuff necessarily back-to-back days, coming off of Tommy John surgery last year. He's got his 1-year appointment. I think it's the first week or so of March. And after that, it seems like it should be full go, no restrictions, just all out, getting ready for the season. But he hasn't caught in the game yet. So he did play first base. And it was interesting that one of the first couple of days that pitchers and catchers were here, he was asked about first base, because that had been, something that was talked about in the offseason, I think, by both Dayton Moore, general manager, and Mike Matheny, the manager, that they might have to get him some more days at first, DH, and, just sort of ease him back into the everyday catching. And so when it was brought up, Salvery said, no, I'm not. He said, my position is catcher. I'm not first base. He said, my position is catcher. He said, I prepare to catch 162 games. He said, less than that is, okay, he'd be easy because you prepare for 162. He said, if more than that, then we make the playoffs. So it's great. So he said, that's the way he approaches it. He said, so this stuff about first base, he's like, I don't want to hear that. So I think, that may just have been he's coming back from injury. Maybe people think he and has lost a little bit. You see these young guys in camp, and just making sure the message is still clear. He's the catcher.
And besides, there are a couple of candidates for first base. When I look around the diamond, I see that as the one position where just not 100%, less than 100% sure who the starter is going to be. I know Ryan McBroom had a home run on Tuesday, and O'Hearn is still the guy that I suppose everybody looks at. So it just seems like if I got that right, the first base is still the sort of the position of a little bit of uncertainty of who's going to end up with the most at bats, most innings at that position.
Definitely, because O'Hearn, who I think he hit a home run. I want to say it might have been the opener for Cactus League. He has one the other day, and they've expressed a lot of confidence in him and what he's done through his career in the minors, and they feel like last year he had a combination of bad luck and just sort of things piling on top of each other when he didn't have success, and then just sort of snowballed on him. And then McBroom, who they didn't even acquire until the very end of August last year, and he came up and was in the big leagues in September with an organization he'd been with for like 5 minutes. And he swung the bat pretty good. He just didn't. The thing you didn't see was the power, because he had hit 26 home runs in AAA, and that wasn't a Pacific Coast League. That was on the East Coast in the International League. So there's real power there. As a matter of fact, I think it was 2 or 3 games before he got acquired by the Royals, he played against Pawtucket, which had Matheny's son on it. So Matheny was there and saw him hit 2 home runs in the game on a day when the ball wasn't carrying. So they know he's got power. He just hadn't shown it. And so a day like today, when the wind's blowing in and he hits a bomb to left, that's what they were waiting to see from him. And there's even a little talk that, depending on how flexible they have this roster, a guy like Hunter Dozier, who's going to be playing outfield, could be a guy who gets some time at first base, or is a late inning first guy who gets shifted to first base when they try and move some guys into the outfield. So first base still remains a little bit of a question mark on how exactly that's going to play out.
Very good. Okay, Lynn Worthy, thanks for the catch-up, and we will talk to you again soon.
No problem. I'll enjoy the sun.
That'll do it for today. Thanks to producers Randy Mason, Savannah Smith, Derek Donovan, Beth Welsh, and Chris Fickett for putting together today's show. Hey, where you can leave a comment and give a rating, please do. And we'll be back on Thursday with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City every day.